Now, today we are going to go on from verse 16, and we're going to go to Romans 12, 17 through 21. Now, the first part, even though I didn't tell you, I had titled my first part of the sermon, Sacrificial Love. Now, of course, we had talked about how all of even sacrificial love has a supernatural element to it, and that we can't do it. But today, in this last part of Romans 12, Paul kind of turns up the fire a little bit. And so today, I titled this, maybe incorrectly, Supernatural Love. Because all of love is supernatural, but this is, things are going to get a little bit hotter here for us. Now, does anybody remember what the word sincere means? Without wax, yes. So, when the heat gets hotter, we want to make sure that still our love is sincere. So as the fire gets hotter, we want to make sure we have no wax in the love that we're showing, but that's a sincere, complete love. No matter how much pressure is applied, no matter how much heat is applied, the love remains, all right? So, what we're about to cover, it's not hard, it's not tough, all right? It's flat out impossible. But that's okay. When things are impossible, when we look at the scripture and we find these things are impossible, that forces us outside of ourselves. And that's exactly where Jesus wants us. He wants us not relying on our own abilities and our own professionalism, our own, let me show you what a great Christian I am. Instead, Jesus wants us completely surrendering to him and leaning on him to accomplish the things that he commands us to do in Scripture. All right? So, the idea from last week was, I said several times, love without action is not love. The idea from this week is going to be that you do not fight fire with fire. Now, as we were covering last week, I kept on trying to encourage you, and I want to encourage you again as we go through this. Jesus isn't so much interested in showing us our areas of failure. Jesus is interested in showing us our areas of opportunity for greater maturity. And so many times when preachers preach and when you're listening to things, you go, I fail at that. I fail at that. And you start getting discouraged. But it's not an area of failure. It's an area of an opportunity for maturity. Now, before I came over here, I worked a variety of jobs. But in two of my jobs, I was a manager. One of them was at a fast food restaurant named McDonald's, similar to Burger King or KFC. Not really a high-end job, but I was a manager there. And there, when we evaluated our employees for a raise, it was just, you're not doing this right, you're not doing this right, you're not doing this right. And because you're not doing those three things right, you're not getting a pay raise. So improve on those areas, and if you improve on those areas, maybe you'll get a pay raise the next time we evaluate you. But then I started working for a retail establishment named Target. And there, they had a different philosophy. We want to encourage our employees to become better. We don't necessarily just want to show them all these areas that they're down. So they exactly use this thing that we called an area of opportunity. So when I called people in to tell them about what they were doing wrong, I would tell them, listen, I would love to be able to give you a pay raise. However, we have a few areas of opportunity for you to move forward in. And if you just work on this area and that area, we can, maybe the next time around, maybe we can give you a pay raise or even a promotion. So we had this one girl who she really liked showing up late. She was a cheerleader, and she always had cheerleading practice before she came to work. Most of my crew, I had a crew of 73, most of my crew was still in high school. And so she would always show up late. But she didn't just show up late. She'd show up 15 minutes late, but she was still in her workout costume here or her uniform, so now she needs time to change, and then she'd run into her friend back by the time clock, so they needed 5 minutes to talk, and everything like that. So she showed up 15 minutes late, but when she actually started working, it was more like a half hour late. Now let me give you a free tip here from someone who used to manage employees. If you're told that work starts at 8 o'clock, does that mean arrive at 8 o'clock? Or does that mean start working at 8 o'clock? So if you have to change, if you have to do all these other things, if you want to make sure you can chat with your friend before, then show up at 7:45 so you have 15 minutes to change and chat. So anyways, that was her area of opportunity. So I had to sit down with her. She moved forward. Actually, eventually she got promoted to a manager as well. Once she was in university, she stayed with the company. She got promoted to management, but it was all about encouraging her that there was this area of opportunity. So as we go through this today, don't look at it as, I'm not measuring up to that, I'm not measuring up to that. Look at it as an area of opportunity to mature. Because, listen, I need to mature in this. What we're going to cover today, is an area of opportunity for me. And I think we'll see, because of supernatural love, really it's an area of opportunity for all of us. All right? Now, so let's move into Romans 12:17a, or just 12:17. Never pay back evil for evil to anyone. And we're going to spend a little bit here on just that first part of 17. So Paul uses the word here, never. So whenever we see the word never, could someone tell me what the exception to that rule is going to be? No exception. Are there any loopholes? No. If someone's been wearing us down, we've been dealing with that person's evil for 5 months in a row, is it okay for us to now, well, I just got worn down, so I need to move, I have to react eventually, I need to defend myself, right? No. We never repay evil for evil to anyone. Now, before we go, this is not a prohibition against self-defense or even warfare, all right? War has to do with nations. So we're talking about individual hearts, individuals here, all right? We're not talking about nations, so this has nothing to do with warfare. Also, it has nothing to do with self-defense, even though our model, Jesus, demonstrated this type of action by showing absolutely no defense for himself. Now, I have a brother who's 2 years older than me. We grew up not that close. We're a bit closer now, and we get along now, and we spend a lot of time together when we're back in the States. But he was 2 years older than me, but everybody thought we were twins. Now, that's not a good start for a good relationship there, because my brother thought everybody should see his clear superiority to me, and the 2 years that he had on me. Not only was I taller, but I had a heavier build, and just all around, I appeared to be the same age, if not older, than my older brother. And this led to a lot of rivalry between him and I. Then, for a series, my brother is an extremely intelligent person. He does graphic artistry in the States, but he was not that gifted academically. So even though he went to school 2 years ahead of me, by the time we arrived in secondary school, we were in the same grade. So that didn't help the sibling rivalry either. And so often we would get in fights. A couple times we did get into fist fights even at school. Everyone laughed. The only two people that ever get in fist fights in this school are these two brothers. So we had our issues. But when I was at Bible college, I had gone home, and one thing led to another. My brother and I got into a fight. So he took a swing at me. My mom was there. My mom is about my wife's size, at least height. And so she, we're two teenage, well, we were in our 20s at that point, so my mom wasn't pulling us apart, but she was very upset that we were fighting. My brother took a swing at me. And then he went to swing at me again, and I grabbed both of his arms. Now, I never swung at him. In this fight, I never swung at him. I just held his arms so he couldn't swing at me. That is self-defense. It doesn't take completely obliterating the other person and pounding them into the ground to defend yourself. All right? And then, of course, Dad came home, and when Dad came home, the fight was over. Interestingly enough, as a side note, from there, I went to an evening service that was going on at my Bible college. And there was a man named Carlton Spencer, who was the founder of the Bible College's son, and he had been the president of the Bible College for several years. And as the service was over and I was telling some of my other friends what was going on and everything, Carlton Spencer came out. He just walked past us really quick, stopped, and spun around. He said, "Son, what's your name?" Oh, and now Carlton Spencer had never spoken to me, and he was kind of a big guy on campus. So I was like, excuse me, sir. Brother Carlton, my name's Mark. He's like, As I was walking by, God told me to tell you, if you ever want to hit somebody, hit them with the Word of God. Now, that man never talked to me before, and I'd seen him, I knew him. So just in case you're ever wondering if God has your number, God has your number. He knows what's going on. You may have not had an experience like that yet, but at some point in your life, that will happen. You'll realize, God really is paying attention, even when I thought I was getting away with something. All right. But often when it comes to self-defense, human nature tends towards escalation. When we read in the Old Testament an eye for an eye, we're kind of saying, well, that's kind of an even playing field, right? But that's not how we're supposed to act now. But it's not how our flesh acts. Someone pinches us, and so we give them a bloody nose. Yeah, and was the bloody nose really necessary to defend ourselves against the pinch? No, but that's the way human nature goes. We always look to get the upper hand. We look to injure the other person more than they injured us, right? So self-defense, is that okay in the Bible? Yeah, but we're not talking about self-defense here. We're talking about repaying evil for evil. So this speaks of taking revenge over an insult, a curse, an injury. Maybe someone's persecuting you, some evil done to us. 1 Thessalonians 5:15, I always struggle with that word, says, "See that no one repays another with evil for evil, but always seek after that which is good for one another and for all people." Now, I'm not going to read it word for word, but for a second, we're going to go to a passage in 2 Samuel. 2 Samuel 16. So in 2 Samuel 15, Absalom, the son of David, has started a rebellion against David. So in 16, David flees Jerusalem. And right there in 5, I struggle with Old Testament name pronunciations. I'll tell you one I can get right, David. I can pronounce that name right. But a man, I will say, Shimei, comes out, and he's doing a couple things here. First, he's hurling insults at David, and he's cursing David, and he's even throwing stones at David and the people that are with him. Verses 9 through 10 in this passage say kind of what David's men want to do, and that shows that David has a different heart. So it says, Abishai, the son of Zeruiah, said to the king, "Why should this dead dog curse my lord the king? Let me go over now and cut off his head." Now listen, this guy's insulting and throwing stones. So you see the nature towards escalation here, right? Human nature. He threw a stone at you. You're the king, so let's go cut off his head. And so many times that's the way we act when we want to get even. But David says, the king said, "What have I to do with you, O sons of Zeruiah? If he curses, and if the Lord has told him, curse David, then who shall say why have you done so? And he says it again in verse 11 and expresses his hope that God might bring blessing in verse 12. But I want to ask a question here. Is the persecuting, is the insulting, is the trial that you're going through, is this person that's been put in your life, have they been sent possibly by God to point out something that's in our lives or to put us through something? So many times we might even be praying for something. My pastor you all met, she was the loud lady that sat in the back when she was here in service the one day. She always says, be careful what you pray for. If you pray for patience, God just doesn't give you supernatural patience. He puts somebody in your life that's really going to try your patience. All right? And then you learn how to have more patience. So maybe this person that's in your life, this person that you're wanting to pay back evil for evil with, maybe they've been put there for some reason. God's trying to point out something in your life. He's trying to strengthen something in your life. Because here's the deal. Who is your enemy? Now, I have an extended quote here from a pastor named Ray Pritchard. We're going to go to that. But when you think of your enemy, who do you think of? Because this whole passage is about how we treat our enemies. Do you think of somebody that beats you up whenever they get a chance, somebody that steals from you, somebody who mocks you every time that they see you, maybe somebody who stole your boyfriend or girlfriend or something like that? This person, maybe you're thinking these are the people that are your enemies. Maybe someone who purposely lies about you at your job so that they get the promotion instead of you because nobody else realized that he was lying. They thought he was telling the truth. Maybe you've had trouble. So these people, we would say, are our enemies. Now, in the story of Balaam in Numbers, Balaam can't get through because God doesn't let Balaam get through. He's trying to get through to the people of Israel and to curse them, but instead only blessings come from his mouth. So if right now you have an enemy in your life, now I'm not saying this is the case every time. Please understand me that different circumstances go into each situation. But right now you have an enemy in your life that's making it through. Maybe you have to ask yourself, why is God letting this person through? If God protected the people of Israel in the case of Balaam, but right now I'm not feeling the protection from the persecution, from the stealing, from the beating, from the lying, why is God letting these things come through? What is happening? It's something to consider during a time of crisis. Now, Ray Pritchard has a interesting definition for who an enemy is. And I was touched by this. This convicted me and made me, when I read this, I had to stop as I was doing my research and just think about this for a few minutes. He defines an enemy as a person God uses to reveal my weakness. All right? An enemy, a person God is using to reveal your weakness. An enemy is a chisel that God uses to chip away the rough spots in my life. Now, sometimes we have enemies that are a lifetime enemy. Sometimes we have an enemy that might only be an enemy for 5 minutes, and then the situation is over. But for those 5 minutes, that person seems like an enemy. And Ray Pritchard even says in his definition of this, that's why if you are married, even your husband and wife can feel like an enemy sometimes. Now, I'll tell you, Michelle's going to wonder what story I'm going to share right now. But let me share a little story about as I was preparing for this. Pastor Stanley let me know about 3 weeks ahead of time when I would be preaching. So for a week and a half, I had this sermon. It was going to be great. It was going to be the best sermon ever. It was going to be wonderful. You were just going to be, this is amazing information and everything like that. I was going to preach on Romans 14. One of my favorite chapters in the Bible. I've preached on it before, and I was going to preach on it again. So as now a week before I'm supposed to preach arrives, I mention a quote I'm going to use in my sermon in Romans 14. Michelle says, what are you going to preach about? I said, well, I told you, I'm going to preach on Romans 14. And she sat quietly for a moment, then said, I don't think you should preach on that. Now, we didn't get into a huge argument because I saw the wisdom of where she was going. But I'll tell you, for the next few minutes, maybe even for the next few days, she kind of felt like the enemy. Because I had spent a week and a half researching, preparing. I had notes on this. It was going to be amazing. And so she told me, so now Michelle is my enemy. and I thought about that. It spent me, so then the rest of Monday went by. The rest of Tuesday went by. All day Wednesday went by. I still have nothing. The sermon's 3 days away. It takes me about a week to prepare for a sermon because I'm not a professional like these two. This is a side job for me. And so I'm starting to get worried, and I'm still feeling like. And I told Michelle, I see the wisdom of what you said, but you've really kind of hamstrung me here. I have no idea what I'm going to preach about. I had something good, and you've really kind of wrecked it. Now, of course, I think God gave me something else right there in the evening on Wednesday, and so this is where this all came from. But there can be times even when God's using your spouse, boyfriend, girlfriend, maybe a friend, a brother or sister, someone who's not your enemy all the time, for a little bit of time, they might seem like the enemy. And God's still using them to show a weakness. God's still using them to chisel away at something. All right? So Dr. John Weck says, it is not for us to retaliate when we are cursed or persecuted. Instead, exercise self-control and pay close attention to what the Lord may be trying to teach you in that situation. All right? Now, Romans 17b, respect what is right in the sight of all men. The Greek word for respect here means to take thought beforehand. If we want to respond biblically in any situation, we need to think before the crisis arrives. All right? And that's really what coming to church, getting solid teachings, even in Sunday school and in the teachings that happen before service, doing devotions and everything. You're starting to get the Word of God inside of you. You start thinking about how you're going to react to any situation as it comes along, right? But we want to take thought ahead of time on how we're going to react in crisis. If we do this, we're less likely to act in our flesh. All right? If we carefully think out our responses in each situation, even unbelievers might observe this and glorify God. Matthew 5:16, let your light shine before men in such a way that they will see your good works and glorify your Father who is in heaven. So, let me tell you, you want somebody to see that you're different? You're a little bit different than everybody else in the world? Don't repay evil for evil. Because that's what everybody else is doing. So even unbelievers will be able to see that and say, wait a second, something's different. What's your name? John. Something's different about John. Right? So that's what we want to do. That action in itself becomes a mission work. There you go. We're proclaiming the word of God and the ministry of God, and that salvation is here because of how we react in times of trial, in times of persecution, in times that evil is being given unto us. If we let our light shine, even men will see your good works and glorify your Father. The principle here is live in such a way that no one can make an honest accusation against you. Make them lie. If they want to say something's going on, make them lie. All right? Don't let them have an accusation against you and have it be the truth. Worry about the things that no one else can see as well. Now, as we are driving here today, my wife laughs at me because I see stains on my shirt and I see wrinkles and stuff that no one else can see, and then I point out, I'm like, you can't see that right there? Like, I can't see a thing. What are you looking at? So as we are driving here today, I noticed that on my trousers right here, I have some small, minuscule stains that I could see. Maybe nobody else could see them. And we all know we have things in our lives that nobody else can see, but we do. Yeah? So even in that sense, worry about the stains, worry about the problems nobody else can see. Only God and you know that those things are there. Take care of those things. All right? Romans 12:18. Now, this is one of my favorite verses in the Bible. I quote this a lot. I try to use it as a little bit of almost a mantra in my life that I repeat to myself time and time again, and I try to live accordingly to it. If possible, so far as it depends on you, live at peace with all men. Now, this is conditional, of course. There's some conditional phrases here. If possible, so far as it depends on you. Because guess what? You can't force others to do the right thing. Others aren't necessarily going to want to do the right thing. Others are going to have an unforgiving heart. Something happened between you and that person. We talked about conflict a few weeks back. You can only do you. You can't worry about other people. All right? Conflict, though, should happen in spite of you, not because of you. And in that situation, because, of course, we're trying to take care, we're trying to do the right thing, we're trying to let our light shine before men. Well, not everybody's going to like you. You can't make everybody your friend. But don't let this conflict that has arisen between you and another person or you or another group be because you caused the conflict. Let it be someone else's problem. Now, once you have done everything within your power, the conditional phrases here, if possible, as far as it depends on you. Once you've done everything that is within your power to resolve a conflict, you've fulfilled your responsibility before God. Matthew 5:9, blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called the sons of God. Make peace where you can. All right? Now, David knew this could be tough. I want to really quick go to Psalms 120, 6 through 7. Too long has my soul had its dwelling with those who hate peace. I am for peace, but when I speak, they are for war. Now, how many people can say that has happened in your life? Now, I definitely can. There's been a lot of times when it's like, hey, listen, we can resolve this. This doesn't need to be a problem anymore. Here's the points we agree on. Here's the points we disagree on. Let's just move on. The other person isn't always going to want to move on. The other person might want to keep the war going. But as David was doing, as David spoke for peace, let us be people who speak for peace as well. Okay, now here's the deal on this, some practical steps here. You can't continue wasting time, energy, and resources on people who will refuse to be reconciled. If the situation changes, if you feel the winds have changed and now that person that you've had that conflict with, if things are moving forward, then, hey, pursue peace. Actually pursue peace. Go out and try to grab a hold of peace. But don't keep on trying to beat a dead horse, all right? If that person is just refusing to be reconciled, you've done your bit. So don't continue to try to force that situation. Wait for God to change it. If you've done your best, don't blame yourself. Give it to God. That's the second principle there. So first, don't blame yourself if you've already done everything you can. The second principle, trust God to change that person. Jesus is the one who changes hearts. You cannot change a heart. You cannot soften a heart. Only Jesus can do that. 2 Timothy 2:24 through 25. Here's my advice for all of you guys, and Paul wrote it to Timothy and to all Christians. The Lord's bondservant must not be quarrelsome, but be kind to all, able to teach, patient when wrong, with gentleness correcting those who are in opposition, if perhaps God may grant them repentance, leading to the knowledge of truth. And then, of course, especially if your problem is with a fellow brother or sister in Christ, maybe find a more mature Christian, the elders, the pastors, somebody like that might be able to mediate and work through that problem with you, all right? But let's look at, as far as it depends on you, do everything possible you can to live at peace, not just with your brothers and sisters, but with all men, okay? Now, Romans 12, my printer went a little crazy here. Romans 12:19. Never take your own revenge, beloved, but leave room for the wrath of God. For it is written, vengeance is mine, I will repay, says the Lord. Once again, we get to Paul's use of the word never. So Paul's kind of hard-hitting with this. He says never a couple times. We're not talking about conditional things, obviously, whenever it says never. So Paul's not leaving a lot of wiggle room here on what he thinks the Christian lifestyle should be. You know, remember, the first part of Romans is all about, oh, we were hopeless. Then the middle part of Romans is all about, but we got Jesus now, and there's no condemnation. And so the whole end part is, now that we have Jesus and we know we have no condemnation, how do we live? So that's what Paul's trying to go through at the end of Romans. So here again, we have the word never. Now, John F. Kennedy said, don't get mad, get even. That sounds nice. That makes us feel good. Getting even makes us feel good. And it feeds our flesh when we get even. But this isn't God's way. The Greek word here for leave room literally means give place. And so the idea here is get out of the way. Let somebody else take care of the problem. Get out of the way. When you are trying to take revenge, when someone's speaking badly about you and your solution is, I'm going to speak badly about them. When someone's beating on you and your solution is, I'm going to beat up on them. When someone's lying about you and your solution is, I'm going to lie about them, you are standing in the way. All right? Because God has a different plan. And you don't want to get in the way of God's plan because no one does vengeance quite like God does vengeance. All right? By refusing to take revenge, you are leaving room for God to exercise his wrath. You cannot do it as good as God can. Now, a quote here from a New Testament scholar, Douglas Moo, says, since Paul normally places the visitation of God's wrath at the last judgment, many commentators think that this refers to a judgment at end times. But in Romans 1:18, Paul makes it clear that God's wrath, though decisively revealed in the last day, is now operative. This makes it possible that Paul is leaving this unspecified for the exact time of the nature of God's wrath. So sometimes that's exactly why we don't want to leave time for God's wrath. Yeah, sure. When we all die and go to judgment, then God's going to take care of it. But that's going to be like 60 years from now. And I don't want to wait around for 60 years for God to take care of this injustice. I want God to take care of it now. And since he's going to do it at the end times, I'm going to do it now. But no, God is even working right now. He's looking after those that are in his kingdom. All right? Now, this quotation is taken from Deuteronomy 32:35, and it's a reminder that no one, like we've already said, does revenge quite like God. Now, the principle is illustrated in 1 Samuel 24, 1 through 22. This is the whole idea of Saul. He's chasing after David. Now, listen, Saul is the epitome of someone trying to make your life miserable when it comes to David. He tried to kill him. He even tried to marry him to his daughter just so that his daughter could give him a hard time because he knew his daughter was a little bit of a pain. And so he's like, not only will I try to make David's life miserable, but I'll try to make his marriage miserable. Saul's just trying to do everything he can to make David's life miserable. So David had every reason to want to reach out, grab a hold of Saul, and end this situation. Not only that, David's been promised that he's going to be king. Yeah? David already knows that. He already knows the promise is there. So, well, we can kind of rush the promises of God. Not only can we take care of vengeance here, but we can rush the promises of God along. Yeah? So Saul, he's pursuing him through the desert. And then in 24:10, David says, I will, excuse me, I jumped ahead of myself there in my notes. Saul enters a cave, and David's at the back of the cave hiding with his men. Perfect time. Right now, I can end my torment. And so Saul's men, they're kind of like, hey, let's get this over with. Let's take care of this. Let's take revenge for everything that Saul has done to us, and let's kill him. And David says, I will not stretch out my hand against my Lord, for he is the Lord's anointed. So then Saul leaves the cave, and then David emerges and essentially tells him, hey, listen, I could have just killed you, but I didn't. Essentially is what David says in a small nutshell there. And Saul sees what could have been done. He says in an extended quote here, you are more righteous than I, for you have dealt well with me, while I have dealt wickedly with you. You have declared today that you have done good to me, that the Lord delivered me into your hands, and yet you did not kill me. For if a man finds his enemy, will he let him go away safely? May the Lord therefore reward you with good in return for what you have done to me this day. Behold, I know that you will surely be king, and that the kingdom of Israel will be established in your name. And years later, Saul's prediction, and what we even knew would happen because it was promised to David, comes true. So David determined to obey God, and God worked out his vengeance on Saul. All right? So move out of the way of God. Let God work out that vengeance. There's something else about avenging yourself that I want to say here. If you are going to take care of your own problem, expect God to remove his hand from your situation. There we go. We're praying about our situation. We're praying that that situation ends, but we're still doing our own thing. We're acting out in our flesh. We're seeking revenge and everything else. Well, your prayers will go unanswered. God's going to remove his hand from that situation if you're insisting on doing your own thing. All right? If you fail to forgive, you lose fellowship with God. And God may then turn and deal with you in a more severe matter. You can see that in Matthew 6, 14 through 15 and 18:35. St. Augustine, we've talked about him a couple times, but I love this quote from him. If you are suffering from a bad man's injustice, forgive him quickly, lest there be two bad men. All right? Forgiveness is really key to even this whole passage as we go through. But what happens when we take vengeance out? The answer is we almost always mess it up. We're either a little too harsh or a little too soft. We either bring vengeance too early or we show up too late. Sometimes we hurt the wrong person or even hurt ourselves instead of hurting the person that we were intending to hurt. We never make matters better when we seek vengeance. Okay? So ask yourself, and I had to ask myself this, and I have to ask myself this in so many situations. Do you want to take care of your own problem, or do you want God to take care of your problem? I can tell you God does it better than you can, so I hope the answer is God. And the other thing about God is he's not just looking to God's revenge. God's vengeance is always redemptive. Okay? And we want redemption. We accomplish nothing by interrupting God's plan. Let's go on to 12:20. But if your enemy is hungry, feed him, and if he is thirsty, give him a drink. For in so doing, you will heap burning coals on his head. Well, that kind of sounds cool, right? There's a traditional interpretation to this passage but we'll look at another way to look at it. Now, this is a quote from Proverbs 25, 21 through 22. Actually, Romans does quote. I mentioned Romans is kind of a complete theology. Now, there's a lot of other things that can come in from other books, but Romans is kind of a very concise breakdown of Christian theology. And Romans quotes the Old Testament more times than any other book in the New Testament, 57 times, because it even tries to bring in those truths, because, of course, we can't understand the New Testament unless we understand the Old Testament. And Romans also proves that we need to have that understanding of the Old Testament. So this quote is from Proverbs. Now, this is very much a military principle. The best defense is an effective offense. We do not respond passively to evil. We don't let it wash over us. But we actively react against evil in a positive manner. Don't destroy your enemies with revenge. Now, Abraham Lincoln, an American president, said, the best way to destroy your enemy is to make him your friend. Now, of course, you don't actually destroy your enemy, but you destroy the fact that you even were enemies when you make somebody your friend, okay? Now, does this mean, this can kind of sound like, as we're going through all this, so what am I supposed to do? Just lay down and take all this? Term we use in the States, are we just supposed to be a doormat? People are just supposed to walk all over us? People are just supposed to oppress us, and we're not supposed to react out. We're not supposed to defend ourselves. We're actually supposed to do good things to them. We're supposed to be feeding them and giving them water and stuff like that. Well, that just sounds like I'm letting them get away with everything, right? But you are not called to be a doormat, as Keith Krell says. You are called to be an elevator. When you let people drag you down into the mud, that's not what you're called to be. And that's exactly what happens when you try to take care of your own situation. Instead, you're supposed to be lifting people up. So you are called to be an elevator. You are to lift people up into the presence of God by graciously giving even your enemy food, drink, in their time of need. So let's understand this heaping coals on someone's head. The traditional interpretation is, if I do something nice to them, it's going to burn them. That's going to make them so angry. They hate me, and then I do something nice to them. That's going to make them angry. So that kind of sounds like, now, if we're going at that with this type of, that's not the spirit of this at all. But sometimes that's the way we read it. And it kind of sounds nice. We want them to burn. We want them to feel inferior. We want them to feel like, how terrible am I that, look, this person is being nice to me and I'm being so mean to them. We don't want them to be able to handle us being nice, right? So it's kind of like we're kind of getting revenge on them by being nice. That's kind of the way you could kind of read this. However, that's not the spirit we want to go at here. If we look into Old Testament, coals of fire always refers to God's judgment. Now, we already talked the fact that we want to leave room for God's vengeance. And coals of fire refers to God's judgment. Douglas Moo once again said, it is also possible that to take the heaping of coals in such a way as to produce a burning sensation of shame and remorse at such unexpected treatment. Our generosity could bring about repentance. So we're even looking for that, right? Remember, God's vengeance is redemptive. So first, we're not just looking to burn our friends, but in that sense, they could go when we react in such an unexpected manner. Why is this person being so nice to me? I can't figure it out. They might start feeling some remorse about their actions. They might start feeling some shame. That remorse and shame is brought on by the Spirit of God, yeah? And when that happens, it can be redemptive. So the meaning here appears to be, when we look at this, even in an Old Testament standard of God's anger and judgment being the coals of fire, that if we return good for evil, we can have an assurance that God will eventually punish our enemy if you yourself do not win them over with love. John Piper, another American pastor, said, "There's a very real sense in which the Christian's love for his enemy is grounded in the certainty that God will take vengeance on those who persist in antagonizing God's people." And we see this example in 1 Timothy 2:23, that God entrusted him, that Jesus entrusted himself in his suffering to God, knowing that God judges justly. All right? So listen, God's got your back. These burning coals are going to be heaped on people's head. That just means do this good thing. Feed the hungry. Feed your enemy when he's hungry. Give him a drink when he's thirsty. And if he persists, remember, you can do the right thing. You can't always force somebody else to do the right thing with you. They might stay in the wrong. Eventually, there will come a place where God will take care of that situation. God will be just, all right? And then we'll end in Romans 12:21. Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. Now, this is extremely straightforward, easy to interpret. However, in our flesh, when we read this, we do not want to obey. Evil gets evil, very, very natural. We've covered that already. Good, when somebody else does evil to you, that's where the supernatural love comes in. And remember, we title this Supernatural Love. It's not tough, it's not hard, it's impossible. You can't do it, God can do it. And God's working inside of you. Surrender to God, let God do this in you. Evil cannot overcome a Christian by doing them harm, or even by killing. Evil can only overcome good when it makes us become evil ourselves. That's a quote from Keith Krell. Now, I'm not sure how many of you have seen the Lord of the Rings movies, but of course, one of the central themes of the movie is a ring. But the ring was produced by the Dark Lord. It was made by the Dark Lord. And essentially what comes out throughout that whole movie is you can keep on thinking you're doing something good while using this ring. You can keep on thinking that I'm going to be able to accomplish something good here by fighting, this person is acting evilly towards me. So I'll take revenge because it's good that this person is put in their place. You cannot do good things by acting in an evil manner. You cannot fight fire with fire. You cannot, in the story of the Lord of the Rings, you can't wage war against the Dark Lord using an evil ring. Okay? Now, a lot of times we see this at Rahema, but I saw this in my own family. You see it a lot of places. We look at life and we look at these conflicts as some type of competition. He hit me, so I hit him back. He said something bad about me, so I said something bad about him. Or the escalation. He called me a bad name, so I hit him in the face. He pushed me, so I threw him down a staircase. Something like that. And this is a very natural way to go on it. All of our lives have had some type of trauma. I can't understand what anybody else has gone through, but I know this. All of us have had some trauma in our lives. I saw a quote once on Facebook. I shared it. I couldn't find it this morning, so I don't know who said this quote, but I certainly didn't. But I want to, last time I told you about a freedom that you didn't realize that you had, but here's another thing that can free you up in life. I did not come up with this, but I can't tell you who quoted it. Learn to accept the apology you never received. Okay? You're not always going to get other people to apologize to you for what they did to you. And it can go way back. Maybe the person died that you felt needed. They were your enemy because of something they did to you, something they said to you, and then they died before they ever apologized to you. And you're still in that place where you're thinking, they wronged me. Okay? learn to accept the apology you never received. As long as you're trying to get even in any situation, as long as you're trying to repay evil for evil, you are still living in the past. You don't know, it could have been a week ago, it could have been a day ago, it could have been years ago. But you, if you're still stewing in this thing, if you're still trying to figure out how you can get even, if you're still maintaining, maybe you're not trying to get even, maybe you're just staying in a place where you're not going to talk to that person. Maybe you're staying in a place where you're not even going to eat a meal with this person that did you wrong. The other person is still winning. That person that did you wrong is still winning. He's still controlling your life. He's still deciding. If you decide you can't eat with somebody, you made that decision. That other person is controlling you because of it. So if instead you decide, I'm going to launch out in good here, this person doesn't deserve the good that I'm going to do towards them, this person doesn't, I'm not even, right now I'm in a place where I don't even want to do the good towards this person. Do it. Because if you're still in that place where you're having bitterness in your own heart, that person is winning. Okay? So we want to be free from these things. We want to be free from the evil that's been done to us. And we have to let go of it. As long as we're still connected to it, we're still chained to it. Here's a funny thing. I think Pastor had said someone likened, I think you quoted this, someone likened to not forgiving somebody else as drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. I don't know who quoted that or if that was your quote, but I remember that. And that's exactly it. This is a quote here. The person that you're having these problems with, he's probably sleeping like a baby at night. He's walking around with a smile on his face. You know, you're sitting here, you're up half the night, you're stressed out. When you see that person, you have, just all this stuff comes into your heart and your mind if you're walking through the streets and you run into that person. This person is won twice when that happens. Once, when he or she actually hurt you, and twice, because you're still thinking about that constantly. No wonder this person, he or she, whoever has done this thing to you, your enemy in your life, is walking around smiling and you're not, because you're still full of unforgiveness and bitterness. And that other person doesn't even realize there's a problem. Or not only that, he doesn't care. She doesn't care. She doesn't care that anything happened. So there you are, you're going through life stress and everything. That other person, they're not even thinking about it. They got a smile on their face. They're going about their day, not even losing sleep over it. So learn how to forgive. This is key. The word overcome in there is significant. It's a passive word, to be overcome. We can't allow this evil to passively overwhelm us. So many times in our lives, in the face of great evil, these things that attack us, and don't get me wrong, they are evil. We might give up or give in. And Paul explains just the opposite here. Rather than allowing evil to overcome us and to conform us to its ways, we must instead overcome evil by the means of good that Paul has instructed us throughout this entire passage, going all the way back. We're overcoming evil. When we act in supernatural love, we're overcoming evil. The arm of the universe is long, but it bends towards justice. That's a quote from Martin Luther King. So in this, we just want to say, obviously, that God, life is a marathon, not a sprint. And so it's always going to bend back towards justice. The good things will happen. The God's vengeance will happen. We'll start seeing those evil things in our life, that evil coming against us. Maybe that person will be redeemed. Maybe they'll become a member of the church. Maybe we'll see their attitude changed around. Maybe we won't. But if we keep on doing the same thing, if we keep on running the marathon of our life, in the end, justice will happen. So I just want to encourage you guys in that to be a peacemaker. I want to end just with that, the takeaway. To be a peacemaker, to overcome evil with good, and to identify relationships. I have relationships right now. I can think of it as I'm going through this right now. I can feel it. I got relationships right now, family members, neighbors, all sorts of other things. Maybe even right now, as we're thinking about people right here in the church. Don't worry, you don't have to identify who those people are for us. But target those specific people. Don't target groups. Target those specific people. Commit them to God and look for peace in those situations. All right? It's supernatural. We can't do it on ourselves. Everything we covered, 9 through 21 in this book, is supernatural. Stay connected to divine, and we'll see these things happen. Okay? Amen. Pastor?